In today's video, we will be going through why modern companies use ELT and in this case instead of ETL. Alright, so let's dive in. Okay, so in the world of data, getting information from its source to place where it can be analyzed is a critical challenge. So for decades, the standard approach was something called ETL, okay? And ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. But increasingly, modern companies are turning to a new paradigm called ELT. So why this shift? So in this video, we will quickly go through the reasons why most modern companies prefer ELT instead of ETL. Okay, so first we will start with defining what ETL is. So ETL stands for extract, transform, then load. So this is what this term stands for: extract, transform, then load. And this ETL process is a highly structured three-step process. So first of all, you start with extract. And in this stage, you are extracting data from various data systems, including databases, applications, APIs, flat files. Basically, in this step, you are extracting your data from where it lives. So basically from the source. So you can see in this diagram here, on the left, this is where your data source is living. So basically, you want to extract that data, and that is the first step in the ETL process. And then next we move into the second crucial step, which is the transform. Okay, and in this step you are cleaning the data, standardizing it, aggregating it, enriching and filtering out what you do not need. So this transformation step typically happens on a staging server or a dedicated ETL tool before the data reaches its final destination. So basically here you are doing the transformation, basically enriching the data before you load it into your target destination. So that's the second step in the ETL process. Okay, and finally the last step here is load. Okay, so L stands for load, and in this step here you are loading the transformed data into your target data warehouse. All right, so again, once you finish transforming your data and you are happy with the transformed and clean data, then you end up loading it into your target data warehouse. And from there, then analytics and anyone else who needs to use that data can go ahead and use it in the data warehouse. Okay, so that is the ETL process. And for a very long time, ETL was the undisputed champion, and it ensured data quality and consistency by processing it before storage. But as volumes exploded and technologies evolved, especially in cloud computing, the limitations of ETL became apparent. So what then is the solution? So the solution then became this new process called ELT. So what is ELT? So ELT stands for extract, load, then transform. And this ELT process is very similar with ETL, only that the order is different, and that order is actually significant. So in ELT, the first step is extract. And in this step, you are extracting the data from your data sources. So in this scenario, you can have your data in email, CRM, NetSuite, Facebook ads, backend systems, or databases. And what you end up doing is you extract your data from those sources, and then you move on to the next step now, which is the loading. And in this loading step, you are basically dumping the data as it is. So you're not doing any transformation before you load it into your data warehouse. So you bring the data from your sources and then you load it into a data warehouse. And mostly these data warehouses are cloud-based. So think of Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, any cloud-based data warehouse. So you bring your data and then you dump it into your data warehouse. It can also be a data lake like S3, Google Cloud Storage. You're basically storing your data as it is. And then finally, once you load your data into your data warehouse or your data lake, you then go to the last step of transformation. And in this step, in the transformation step, then you actually have your data already in your data warehouse, and then you end up transforming the data within the data warehouse, right? So this is where the tools like dbt come in, right? So this is where you have transformation tools like dbt, or you can even just write your basic SQL within your data warehouse. But the singular step here is that you instead of transforming your data before you load it, you actually load the data first. So now you have your raw data within your data warehouse, and then from there you end up with the transformation. And this is significant because with cloud computing and cloud data warehouses coming in place, they provide you with massive scalability. The storage is limitless and it's also cost effective, right? So you don't have to worry about things like cost or even storage. So you just bring your data as it is, and then from there you can decide what to do with that data, right? So that is the ELT process, and a lot of companies actually are adopting this process because it is much easier to play with the data instead of going with the rigid ETL process instead, right? So when you hear people saying, oh, I am an ETL engineer, mostly what they mean is they are doing this ELT process. People still confused with ETL because ETL has been there for so long and it's kind of being, it's been used a lot. So whenever you hear somebody, oh yeah, I do ETL, mostly what they mean is ELT, because a lot of companies actually have switched into the ELT process. There might still be out there a few of them that are still using ETL, but most of them are actually using ELT. All right, so what are the advantages then of ELT? Why are companies switching to ELT? So the first advantage and the reason here is leveraging the power of cloud, right? So one of the biggest reasons why most companies are switching to ELT is because of the rise of cloud data warehouses like Snowflake, BigQuery, and Amazon Redshift. These platforms offer virtually unlimited compute and storage, making it feasible and efficient to load raw data fast and then transform it later. Alright, so again, I did mention earlier that cloud data warehouses like Snowflake, BigQuery, you can think of Redshift, even S3, that's a data lake, and Google Cloud Storage, Azure Blob Storage. All of these platforms actually do offer you unlimited amount of storage. So you don't need to worry then about storing your raw data before you transform it. And that's one of the reasons why companies are going with this process instead, right? So you load your data, you know that you do have a massive amount of storage available for you, so you don't have to worry about storing your data. So then you just dump the data in there, and then from there you then go ahead and explore that data, transform it, and then use it for your analytic purposes, right? So then the rest of these data warehouses is one of the reasons why a lot of companies are switching, and you'll find a lot of the modern companies or companies using these modern cloud data warehouses are actually going with this process of ELT instead of ETL. And then the next reason here, or benefit of switching to ELT, is scalability and speed. Okay, so with ETL, transformations can be a bottleneck. If your data volume grows, your ETL process might struggle to keep up. However, with ELT, by loading raw data directly, it is much faster because you already have your data then in your data warehouse, and then from there you can go ahead and process that data, right? So the heavy lifting of transformation is offloaded to highly parallelized architecture of the cloud data warehouses, allowing for much greater stability, right? So again, you bring your data to your data warehouse, and then from there you have your data there, so you don't have to worry about going and reprocessing the data again. So you already have the data there, so even if something happens in your transformation step, say the logic that you use in your transformation is not working as intended, then you can still go back and look at your data and then tweak your transformation. And then we go to the next reason and advantage, and this is flexibility and agility, right? So business requirements change constantly, and with ETL, if you need to transform data differently, you often have to re-architect your entire ETL pipeline. However, with ELT, because you have the raw data readily available, you can perform new transformations on the fly, experimenting with different analytical models without impacting the loading process. And this agility is crucial for data science and machine learning initiatives. The other one that we have here is access to raw data, right? So by loading raw data, you retain every piece of information. This is invaluable for deep historical analysis, auditing, and for future use cases that haven't been fully conceived yet, right? So in ETL scenario, data that wasn't deemed necessary for immediate reporting might have been discarded during the transformation phase. Very important step, right? So this point is also very important. So in ETL, because you're transforming your data before you load it, you might have put some filters in place. So then you end up discarding some data that you might have needed down in the process. But now with ELT, you bring your data into your data warehouse and then you transform it. So you still have access to that raw data in case you needed it later in your process. Okay, so ELT is actually much more stable and much better approach instead of using ETL. And then finally, we have here cost effectiveness as one of the reasons why most companies are switching to ELT. While data processing still incurs cost, the overall cost structure of ELT can be more favorable compared to ETL. Cloud storage is incredibly cheap and you only pay for the compute resources you use during the transformation phase rather than maintaining expensive on-prem ETL server running constantly. So what is the impact then of switching into ELT from ETL? So this paradigm shift empowers various teams. So data scientists can access complete and transformed datasets, allowing them to build more robust models. Business analysts can also quickly iterate on new reports by transforming data as needed, and the emphasis here moves from predefining all transformations to having data readily available for diverse analytical needs. So here, anybody that needs to use the data will have the data in its raw form, and then from there they can then decide what to use that data for, which is different from ETL, where you predefine the transformations before you bring it into your data warehouse. So there's a lot of flexibility again when it comes to ELT instead of ETL. And therefore, in conclusion, modern companies use ELT instead of ETL because it aligns better with the realities of big data, cloud computing, and agile analytics. ELT process brings speed, flexibility, and the retention of raw data, allowing organizations to derive more value from their information assets faster and efficiently. And so if you are building a modern data stack, understanding the power of ELT is very fundamental. Alright guys, so that's all I had for you in this video. I just quickly wanted to go through a very high level overview of why modern companies prefer ELT to ETL. And so I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, please give it thumbs up and also do subscribe to the channel if you have not, so that you can stay updated for videos like this in future. Alright, I will see you then in the next video. Bye bye.